Now I speak to you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, which I try to do anyway. Tough lessons today, right? It's been a long, hard slog for Jesus. Hasn't been easy, this ministry that he's undertaken. On the one hand, almost everywhere he goes, people flock around him, begging him for healing and listening eagerly to his teaching. But do they understand everything he says and does? Judging by his disciples, who seem often to misunderstand what's going on, probably not. And they're the ones who are the closest to him, the ones who ought to get it. Then come the actual opponents to his work, the authorities from the religious establishment, questioning everything and challenging him at every turn. So far, everything Jesus has done has been in the region around the Sea of Galilee, many miles north of Jerusalem. He's crossed the sea several times, moving between Jewish territory to the west and Gentile areas east of the Jordan River. He has taught, and he's healed, and he's fed, and he's argued everywhere. So it's no wonder that he might long for a stretch of quiet downtime out of sight of the crowds. The city of Tyre is 30 or 40 miles away northwest of the Sea of Galilee on the coast of the Mediterranean in an area known as Phoenicia, part of the Roman province of Syria. Tyre is a seaport full of Romans and Greeks and people from all over. Surely there, Jesus can disappear into the crowd and get away with his disciples for at least a little while. They're given hospitality in a house, hoping to escape notice. But it just doesn't work. Word gets out. People from this region had traveled all the way down to Galilee to see him. And there's a knock at the door. The woman walks in and throws herself at Jesus' feet, begging him for help. Her daughter is possessed by an unclean spirit, a demon. Now, given all that Mark has told us that Jesus has done, it looks like he could help her, no problem. He's helped so many others, cured the sick, brought the daughter of a Jewish official back from the dead, cast out a whole legion of demons from a Gentile madman, sending them into a herd of pigs. People have been healed of physical ailments when all they did was touch his clothing. He's fed 5,000 people with only 5 loaves of bread and 2 small fish. To his disciples and others who watched, it seemed marvelous, almost easy the way he did it. Why not help this woman too? How is she different? But it certainly looks like he sees her as different from those others, because rather than go with her to her daughter, as he did with Jairus, rather than call her daughter, as he did the woman who had been bleeding for 12 years, rather than quietly give her the help she asks for, instead, he tosses a parable at her, and a kind of rude one at that. Feels like total rejection. It's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. Now, he's not talking about your precious house pets. He's insulting her by calling her the lowest thing in their world, a dog, unworthy of his notice, never mind his help. The commentaries I read this week had different takes on what Jesus is doing here. One suggested that he was just grumpy and tired, so he snapped at her, expecting her to be insulted enough to go away and leave him alone. Others pointed out the huge cultural issues that separate the two. She's a woman and a foreigner. She's stepped out of bounds by not having a male make the request for her. We don't know for sure what her social status is, but she may well be wealthy as a member of the Gentile ruling class in Tyre, as opposed to his status as a poor itinerant teacher from a peasant background. All those things are possible explanations for why Jesus challenged the woman's plea, But I have another suggestion to offer. She stepped across the boundaries of race, nationality, class, gender, and custom to reach out to him. And her cry for help became an invitation for him to step across those boundaries too, more than he'd ever done before, and to expand his vision of where and whom God was calling him to serve. When Jesus speaks his little parable of children and dogs, he is, of course, referring to the children of Israel, God's own chosen people, and the dogs are everybody else. Could he be testing her somehow? Trying to talk past her with a question over her head? But the woman understands what he's saying immediately, and she doesn't hesitate to acknowledge that the children should be fed first. But she deflects the insult and persists, asking him to share just the leftover crumbs of grace for the sake of her child. I can see him looking intently at her as something shifts in him. His sense of community widens. God's steadfast love for all human beings shines even more clearly to him than ever before. Her response has opened up his eyes to see her too as one of God's children, opened his ears to hear the voice of faith from one outside his faith. He lifts her to her feet and sends her home with the assurance that her child has been healed. The story marks something of a U-turn for Jesus. However long he may have stayed to rest in Tyre, he did not go back to his old territory soon. The return Mark speaks of is actually a long ramble in directions that don't make a lot of sense geographically. Here's the Sea of Galilee. Tyre is up here. Sidon is north of Tyre, farther still from Galilee. And the Decapolis, where he goes and opens the ears of the deaf man, is way down here, south and east on the far side of the Jordan. Jesus leaves this encounter with the Syrophoenician woman with a wider world to engage than he had before. And it's a world that included Mark's own community and its sense of mission, a world that includes you and me. Think of it. Where would we be, Gentile descendants of Gentiles that most of us are, if Jesus had only attended to Jews? What does his broad embrace from the cross mean for us as his followers? The letter of James speaks to our calling as Christians from exactly the same perspective, as does the reading from Proverbs. What both of them are saying is that God has created every one of us and loves us each and all equally. No one of us is better than another in God's eyes. It is our duty to try to see with those same loving eyes, treating everyone with equal respect as a beloved child of God. It's a big job, loving all humankind. With the exception of Jesus, we are not very good at it, judging by experience. So maybe it's a good idea to start close to home, start small. James was writing to his own community and urging them rather strongly, thank you for that wonderful reading, strongly to treat each other without partiality or acts of favoritism. In the past few weeks, I've heard Father Robert urge us repeatedly to pay attention to our own sense of being a loving community here at Holy Cross. Love your neighbor as yourself is work that can fill a lifetime. And it's not about warm, fuzzy feelings. It's about action. It's second only to putting all that we are and all that we have into loving God, the creator of all things and all people. The great thing is that the circle created by active working love, growing from God to self to neighbor, is infinitely expandable beyond our families, beyond our friends, beyond the people around us who are just like us, because a neighbor is anyone at all who needs mercy and kindness in their life. How far does your circle of love extend? Who are your neighbors? Do they have to share your faith or your race or your social status or your politics? Or are you open, eyes and ears and heart, to those who are different? We all need love and mercy and grace, and God offers that at this table. Let's share it in an ever-widening circle. Share it all, and not just the crumbs. Amen.